Hey, welcome back to the Broker's Voice. I am excited today. I have Ross Connor joining me, partner with Hotchkiss Insurance in Fort Worth, Texas. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he is also teammates with the one, the only Chris Hamilton, which we have had on this show prior. So, Ross, welcome to the Broker's Voice, my friend.
Thanks. Good to be here, man.
Awesome. As you can see, he's a busy advisor. He had to pull over in his car just to do this episode. So, Ross, the question I ask everybody before we get into details about the career is, how the heck did you find yourself in the insurance industry?
It found me, and I was a general contractor for about 12 years. I was building stuff. I had a business background. I loved tangibility and construction and seeing progress at the end of a day's work. But the mortgage crisis took all that from me because I made a lot of bets in the housing industry in 08, 09 that turned out to be very untimely. And so I started over completely in every sense of the word with my wife and 5, now 6 children. And so I literally would have shoveled horse manure if you told me I was going to pay my bills. So not that insurance is like shoveling manure, but it is some days, as we know. But
You're actually kind of delivering a lot of manure.
You are. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a it's a good point. So I literally, as a matter of fact, it's interesting. We're talking today. Yesterday, I was literally at the campfire in a buddy's backyard at an event, and our agency execs were around for a random reason. I said, "Hey guys, believe it or not, this is the exact campfire I was at 13 years ago, and I decided to call you guys and change careers." And so I've been at it about 13 years now, and
all
learned
with
how to
Hotchkiss,
spell
right?
insurance.
All with
Hotchkiss, yeah.
So how did you? I was just curious. How did you get in touch, or did Hotchkiss get in touch with you?
I had relationships, man, going back to college days. And they, when times got tough, I never, ever leaned into those relationships in business. I just was carving a path on my own, running a construction company. But when things got hard, you can have a whole podcast on the power of relationships, right? And just regardless of what you know, who you know, and it's that old adage, but it was so true at that point in my life. I called them up and I just said, hey, and they insured me for a while on my property and casualty. We didn't have a benefits program at the time. Actually, that's not true. We had 401k, but it all came crashing down. I called them. I said, I know what y'all did for me, but what do you really do? And they're like, why do you ask? I was like, because I'm getting out of this. And that conversation led to 4 more. And within 2 months, I was an employee. So,
wow, that's awesome. Quick question that I probably didn't intend to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyways. You're 13 years in now, right?
yeah.
Looking back, sitting at that campfire 13 years ago, like knowing who you are today and who you were when you got in, is there any advice you would give your 13-year younger self getting into the business?
Yeah, I would tell that guy, trust the people that you decide to walk through life with. And if they tell you to do something and you'll be successful, try with every bone in your body to do that thing. Because for me, Andy, it was so prescriptive back in the day. They literally said, if you do this, you will be successful. And I didn't know any different. And in those days, this was before the Andy Nearys of the world. And I didn't know Andy Neary. And it was cold calling and dialing for dollars. And it was a numbers game, and it was slow slugging for 3 to 4 years. And I would tell that same guy the attitude of, I can't afford to fail. And truly, I couldn't back in the day. But if you have the I can't afford to fail attitude and just do with everything you have what people tell you to do, it will happen. But people get so frustrated nowadays, I feel, because the sighting is so short term. And I always felt this, Andy, and it's true today. If I plant those seeds, they're going to get sprouted and they're going to grow something. Like they can't not grow something if I'm just consistently planting seeds. And I still plant seeds, but I also harvest a lot, in terms of managing the relationships we have now.
So. Yeah, I love what you said there, because I remember when I got in the industry, I was sold the dream, right? It was 2002. And the part I didn't recognize at that point is, oh, you actually have to work hard to get this. So I did not have that attitude of I can't not fail. But you talk about now this whole planting the seeds. Of course, we have better technologies and tools today than you and I had 15, 16 years ago, but I that's how I view this thing. I tell some of our clients, I call it opportunistic chaos. If you're throwing enough out there, planting the seeds, whether it's using LinkedIn, emails, you almost can't not fail.
Yeah.
Like you're going to create activity.
Yeah.
And I think that's so powerful for other people to hear, because as funny as you talk about how you were trained, Ross, most producers are still just doing that today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've always understood this too and believed this. And this goes back to sports. I played college football. I know you played baseball as well. So we have plenty of lessons we've learned through sports, right? But I always respected and was in awe of the people that had God-given ability to on the football field in this case, but also worked their tail off. And that was a rare combination, right? And the NFL is even full of people that have a ton of raw talent, but they don't work that hard. And we had those people on our team. But there were some people on our team in the early 90s. We won a championship in the Southwest Conference back in the day. And there were some people on that team that were the backbone of the team. And they're those people that worked their tail off and were naturally gifted. Now, natural talent alone ain't going to get you there. Working hard sometimes ain't going to get you there. But when you can combine both, and I'm not saying you have to have talent. What I'm saying is talent can be developed in education. I certainly kind of developed that, I think, in insurance, because I couldn't even spell insurance. But I've always enjoyed the complexity of it and the verbiage and the intellectual exercise. I always have. So if I combine that with strong work ethic, and yes, we can talk more about throwing in personality into the deal. I'm like, to me, it was like a difference maker. I'm like, man, I can go sell insurance, or I can really sell insurance if I can combine some of this ability with just dogged determination, man. I mean, and I think one without the other ain't going to get you there.
So I'm going to admit something. I've worked with you, and I don't know if I knew you played college football. Where did you play?
I was at Texas A&M from 92 to 95, I think, is when I was there. On the team.
How did I not know? Okay, we got to go. Okay, tangent. Okay, what position?
You've met me, right? So I'm about what?
6'4". You're tall, man. You're a tall guy.
You would never guess, but I was actually a place kicker.
Yes, folks, this is the first time in the history of the Broker's Voice or my other podcast, Bullpen Sessions, we have a college kicker on the show. This is freaking awesome. By the way, was that the RC Slocum days?
RC Slocum days, yes. And the quick story to the whole thing is I had many concussions back in the day in high school playing contact football. I was a tight end and defensive end. I wanted to play D1 for some unknown reason. And I don't know to this day, I could always kick a football really far. So when I quit playing and the coaches and doctors made me quit playing contact in high school, it literally, Andy, when I look at the life turns in my life, not to over dramatize it, the fact that I could no longer continue to play contact football, but I had this weird little skill and I decided to stay on the team in high school anyway. I wound up kicking 2 really long field goals in the Texas high school playoffs at Kyle Field my senior year, and they sent me letters, and it was all kind of downhill from there. I mean, uphill, downhill from there. So
okay. Coaching, live coaching. You're getting live coaching right now. One, I'm embarrassed that I've worked with you and I didn't know that. Number two, I need to see, I want to see you talk about that. Like that, there's a very important life lesson in what you just said about being that kicker. You had a very special gift, a unique gift, and you decided to use it, and lo and behold, here you are kicking Division I in the Southwest Conference. If you were playing today, it would have been SEC.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It is. But a lot of pain and frustration in the middle of that, right? And before that happened. And it was always second best for me. I always wanted to be out there mixing it up, and I didn't want to be just a kicker. There's so much in there. But when I look back on that, Andy, and that one little change in high school, having to shift a major career, played baseball too, had an opportunity to play in college, but I wasn't as good as I was at the other. So I had all these decisions to make. But through the football team and my connections, I met my wife. I mean, all these things happen for a reason, right? And there's a whole different lesson we can talk about on that. But it's maybe it's perseverance, and maybe it's just, you know what, I'm going to keep plugging away. And and I think that's probably the biggest lesson is, man. And I've talked a lot about being yourself, but a lot of that comes from a lot of hard hard lessons and redirection, a lot of redirection,
100%.
right? And that's why.
100%. No, that's
But
and thank you for bringing back memories of the Southwest Conference days. That's a blast from the past right there. You said something else I do want to talk about quickly though, from a sports standpoint. Fake it till you make it, or getting by on talent alone. I saw that a lot in college baseball, where in high school, right, especially if you're from maybe a smaller town, you can absolutely compete your way through high school on skill alone and not have to put a lot of effort in off the field. You're just that good. But once you get to college, especially D1, you played D1 football, I played D1 baseball. You can't get away with talent alone. If you do not put in the work off the field, you will get passed up. And I saw a lot of guys in division in baseball that happened to them. They come from small towns where they're the proverbial hometown hero. And now they come where there's a team full of hometown heroes. And some of those athletes phase out because they're unwilling to put that work in off the field. You probably saw that at even major college football.
Yeah. Totally.
Well, totally. And this is a good segue this is a good segue into what you're doing today with insurance. One thing I want to talk to you about is you said something that's so profound, putting your personality in your work. And you and I'm going to make, disclosure. I've worked with you and we had talked, we started working on how can we help you create a content game. And you shared a story with me that I want you to share with the audience, because I felt like it was a kind of an unlock for you, where you used to write these funny articles at the agency, even when you were newer to the agency. There was a risk of like, who the hell is this guy? But talk about that, where you were putting your personality into the internal content you were creating for your team. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. So I got a lot of the raised eyebrows, but I had been in the industry long, and going back, I mean, I had always, even back to, single digit years, I had always created these characters and done skits. And I was just always, it's just part of who I was. My family used to love it and laugh at these Christmas times. And I thought it was just awesome. And I love making them laugh. Right. And so it's just kind of part of who I am. But when I went through financial difficulty and refigured everything and got some stability, I started seeing some stability. I was starting to have a little success. I was also aware of how boring and anticlimactic the closing process was in an insurance transaction, right? 2 to 3 months of work and hard work with a team leads to just a signing of a page and a handshake. And nobody really wanted to deal with insurance even in the first place, but we got them to commit to change a relationship, and it was either hard or easy, but either way, they just signed a paper and I walked out the door. Yeah, I'm excited, right? And so I just had the thought, man, I'm going to liven this up. Like, what if there's a superhero, right? And he has there's AC/DC thunderstruck music, blaring from the bathroom, and this lady this guy comes out in a blue suit. I mean, the whole vision. And so I started creating fictitious emails using real client names about how the transaction went down, and using the people in the office, and I was giving them props. And it was just this crazy, wild ass story about, and people didn't know if it was true or not, and they were like, and so I just loved that they were guessing. And then people started calling me going, what is this? I don't understand. I'm like, and it really started with them. I said, listen, after I sell an account for the next 24 hours, I want you to call me Vanilla Thunder. Like, I'm not going to respond to anything else. And so literally the next day they would go, hey, Ross, blah, blah, blah. And I just keep walking. Right. And they're like, Vanilla Thunder. And I'd be like, oh yeah, can I help you? And so I started doing this. And so the character became Vanilla Thunder, but it was a part of my personality, and it helped me during a really rough time of life. And yes, there were people that really thought I was nuts and whatever, but I started, finally people said, you got to send this to the entire agency. And so I sent it to the agency, and it became fun. I really would stay up at night writing these emails and articles, cracking myself up when I'm like, and I got to the point, Andy, and maybe there's a lesson here too. If it's important and funny to me, maybe I'm arrogant enough to think it's going to be funny to somebody else. Right. Or at least I'm not going to be embarrassed when I send this out.
It's funny you bring that up, because I write our weekly email newsletter that goes out, and last week I wrote one where I had, more than usual people reply being like, that was good. And it's funny because I remember writing that and I was actually laughing as I was writing it because it was talking about how I used to be bad with women. And when I got done writing and laughing, you to your point, you're like, if I think this is good, I think it's going to be really good to everybody else. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
Which is kind of the whole concept of you can't fake it. And I quit doing it for one reason is there's a feel and an intuition I think you respond to. When it was forced, I took a step back. I actually started selling a bunch of insurance and I got in a leadership position. So I didn't want to make it seem, it was kind of great when nobody knew me, but then when they did, it was more of a, hey, who's this guy? And so I'm not beyond doing it. People still call me that to this day. There were several Christmas parties that I hosted and led for our agency wearing a ridiculous blue costume and a cape. And so we took it to a whole nother level at one point, but, I still have a catalog of those stories somewhere. I read them and just make myself laugh, but I have a lot of foster and adopted kids as part of our story as well. And so that character had this crazy family of kids all over the world. He would, I mean, it was just, there was a little bit of life as art, right, as reality stuff going on. But anyway.
Well, you can better guarantee, Ross, when I put this out on social media, the description is going to include, you will learn why Ross was called Vanilla Thunder. So
I love it.
But I think there is also important lessons in this. This was just who you were. Mm-hmm. And I look at like my early career, I'm just a very energetic person, like when I speak and stuff. And I remember how many times early on I was told to stop being this person, because in this business, if you want to win and be taken seriously, you got to look stoic and you've got to look the part. And I'm like, but I'm not being me. And if you're going to tell me I can't be me to win business, I'm not interested in this gig. And I think that's what you have done so well, is bled your personality into what you're doing. So people are getting to learn and know the real authentic Ross Connor. And I think that's so important. And I want us to go to one more event you talked about offline with me. It was a post you made recently. If people saw it, I think we just lost Ross there on a camera. I'll keep talking. If we'll wait for Ross's camera to come back, hopefully. If you didn't see it, Ross posted a piece of content online, and in the post, he was at a gala, a charitable gala for the insurance industry. And I'm still talking about you, Ross. You're good. You were at a charitable event, a gala for a charitable event for the insurance industry, and you were wearing this ridiculous suit.
Yeah.
And what you said to me offline was very profound. Talk about, literally, let's go to that evening, to the point where elevator door opens, Ross exits out of the elevator. Talk about what that was like, because you were just being you. Wearing the wacky suit is who Ross Connor is. So talk about that evening.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely you got to be comfortable in your own skin mentality. I think I've had, and I don't know, I've always, I don't know. It is a little bit hard to talk about, but without self-promotion. I've always been wired a certain way. I felt if I could do business in the way that I'm wired, it's going to appeal to a lot of people, but it's not going to appeal to everyone. But the people that it appeals to, eventually, my book of business and those relationships in business I walk through life with are going to be fully aware of who I am, fully approving of who I am, and have a good time doing it. And if they didn't, if those three things weren't happening, I really didn't want to do business with them anyway. But video content, and I'll talk about that night. But a lot of that, when they do see me, right, or I get, there's not a lot of mystery. It's like, hey, you can hear my voice on the phone perhaps, but I bought that suit for a client event 2 months ago, and it was a big disco thing. And I'm like, my wife's like, well, it's a cowboy event. What are you going to do? And I'm like, that disco event's going to become a Western outfit. She's like, you cannot do that. I'm like, I can do that. Right. So I showed up, and our agency principals came around, and they just kind of ducked their head and shake it, because they have come to realize, they're like, oh my God, we should have known. I think is what they said. We should have known. I'm like, well, here it is. and it was so fun because yes, it attracted. I talked to so many people that I never otherwise wouldn't have talked to. But what's interesting, Andy, is I had several people come up that I had either newly formed a relationship with, and this was a large industry charitable event in the industry, right? And we raised $1 million that night. It's a big event, and there were some new relationships and some I didn't even have. I had one lady accost me and shoved me into a photo backdrop in front of my wife and grabbed me while her husband just raised an eyebrow. I mean, it was so funny. But they were like, "Hey, I feel like I know you because I've seen you on LinkedIn, or I've seen your content. I feel like I already know you." And I was like, it was a huge compliment. But what they probably were saying was, "This doesn't surprise me, and I don't even know you," right? And that's like the best thing ever, because how great is it to go into a relationship where those barriers have already been lowered, so to speak, So
yeah, it's a great point, because when I think about what you have to do today to stand out in a very noisy market, and you're in a very noisy market of Dallas-Fort Worth. One, you have to build brand recognition, and most of the people in the industry have not done that yet. So they're kind of an anonymity, and their prospects can't even find them or see them. Step two is now you build a brand recognition, and a very big problem in today's world is the person I'm seeing online the real person? But now if you can take that and really all you're doing is showing the true authentic version of you online, that's the game changer. Because if I meet you in person now and you're exactly the same person I see online, there is instant credibility.
It's good.
And I think what you've done such a good job with is, your humor is a big part of your story. And whether it's writing the funny emails back in the day, the stories, or dressing up in a disco outfit for Western night, that's you. That's who you are.
Yeah.
And that prospect might see you at that gala, but now they are open to inviting you to a meeting at their office. They're still going to get the funny, same humorous Ross walking in the office.
Yeah. I think so. We talked earlier about talent and determination, right? You got talent, then you got determination. Well, part of that same, it's not just a two-sided coin. It's like a three-sided coin, because the other missing factor there is what the word is, personality. But I'm thinking the unique things that make Andy. Like if you can combine, and I've made this analogy too, Andy. When I started in the industry, I was learning to spell insurance, right? And I was soaking in all the courses and the content. It was such an interesting thing. It kind of took me back to my business background, but I was so robotic for the first couple of years. I was trying to come out of that, but I was very robotic. And I tell our young producers this, I'm like, the more that, in this case, Ross Connor can come through, now I've got this insurance knowledge. It happens to be that I'm in the insurance industry. You could sell, industrial hoses. I don't care. But it's now that I've got the knowledge, and really now it's good, in-depth, highly intellectual, well thought out, creative knowledge about how to transfer risk. If I've got that and I can have a high level conversation, but yet be myself, right, and work hard, it's like a maybe three-legged stool, whatever the analogy is. But there's another thing in there too. And I was like, the less robotic I became, and the emails and all the things and the fun part of me started coming out, not immediately, but after the first year or so it did, because I'm like, I've got this. I can actually start running and chewing gum and saying, spelling insurance at the same time. But the quicker you can cycle through that period, man, the better you're going to be. But I think it's a natural evolution. But some people don't come out of the robotic stuff, man. They don't.
And I think what you said is it's spot on. There's nothing more freeing than being able to do what you love, being you.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think a lot of people, especially in our industry, a lot of people aren't really showing their true colors. And I mean that in a positive way. Like, we don't get to know the real person because they think they have to be this different version to win business, which isn't the case at all. And for you, you've now started using that concept and applying it to social media.
Yeah.
And we're seeing the videos from you. You've got a podcast. Like, if you haven't had a chance to see Ross's stuff, it's good. I'm still laughing, Ross, at that video you shot where you put the Spartan helmet on. I mean, you want to talk about catching somebody's attention in the first 3 seconds. I'm like, I've got to see this. I want to know why that's on his head.
Yeah. If you want to really get a laugh, be in our house when Amazon comes up and we play my wife plays the "What Did Dad Order" game, and and I've been wanting one for a while for a host of reasons, but one, I was trying to drive a point home, right? And I'm like, okay, and looks ridiculous, but it was fun.
But it's who you are. That's the point I want to drive. I'm going to ask 2 more questions, one personal, one back to the business.
Yeah.
You said, I'm really impressed. You have 6 children?
Yeah.
Are they all adopted or foster children?
One is biological, our oldest. The rest of them are adopted through the foster.
I was just curious, like when you and your wife made that decision, I mean, 5 foster children or adopted children, that's a lot, man. I mean, one, God bless you for doing like that. Is talk about the kindness of your heart. What made you guys make that decision? I'm curious.
No, that's a great question. And that's a part of our story that I don't really put out there. I'm happy to do it. I love doing it, but it's like, there's that point, right? You want to know the boundaries of what's appropriate and how do I share this part of my life, which is a huge part, right? And I'm glad you asked the question, but I don't typically throw that out. And there's ways to do that probably in the future that's appropriate, but it's just who we are. But we had, we had a hard time having our first son, had him. And the cool thing is that even with our first biological son, we were literally in a fertility specialist office going, okay, we finally broke down and said, we're having trouble. What are we going to do here? And looking back on it, my wife was actually pregnant in the fertility meeting. She didn't even know it. And so I'm like, great. Hey, we're in the club. Right. And, but then 4 years after his birth, everything went fine. We still couldn't have more kids. And so we quickly started going. And at one point I had the money to spend on expensive stuff to try to figure out and get kids. And right. There's a lot of medical stuff you could do, cost money. And at one point in my building career, we had it. Well, then as I going back full circle to my story, there was a period of our life we didn't have any money and we couldn't afford that. So we quickly kind of go, how do you grow a family? And God, what's God's plan, right? In this whole thing. And so we quickly settled on adoption and literally had doors. I visited other countries. We looked internationally, but we're driving home from breakfast one day in a small town we lived in. And there was a huge sign that said, learn about foster care with a big arrow. My wife's hitting me. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. We kept driving. She goes, let's just get some information. And then the rest is history. So I turned around, went back. And then most of our kids came through CPS and they're all different colors, all different, ages, but they fight and they love just like a normal family. We've had them since they were 2 days old to 3 years old. We got babies and small toddlers. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. So cool.
Yeah.
Well, last question before I let you run.
Yep.
There was an advisor listening in on this episode who, is sitting there going, I know I want to be more me out there, but whatever reason I have this hesitation, I have this fear. Now that you're putting yourself out there, probably more than you ever have, especially with social media, what advice would you give that advisor?
I would tell that advisor, the people that you're trying to communicate with and that you ultimately want to do business with, there's a type of person that's out there, right? The best type of person is one that matches with you and your personality, because it's going to not get you as tired. The only way to meet that person is to be yourself in front of them. And they're people, right? Even C-level execs are people just like you with insecurities and hobbies and things. I mean, they are people, right? And so the more you get to know them, it should help you with the freedom to whatever medium you choose. And the video production is a great idea. It's scary at first, but it's a great idea because it allows, it's multi, it's multi-sense. There's so many senses going on, right? But there's a lot of different mediums, but I've done print before and I want to do more print, but the people that you want to do business with are out there, but there is no differentiator between you and everybody else that's saying the exact same thing. And as slick as you want to make your message and your product in a commoditized world, right? And there's definitely different products for insurance. We can talk about the unique products, but the difference maker is you. It is you. And if you want your client base to look like that, and if you want to write the profile for your client base, then just be yourself, because you're going to attract those people. And I found that to be true. And honestly, Andy, if this is advice for a young broker getting in or another broker, I wouldn't have experienced that or understood that had I not done it. Right. It wasn't that I had this thought of, it's not an experiment. It's more of, I'm going to get too tired if I don't be myself, right. And at some point you feel like you're not being genuine with your own self 100%. If you're out there and I
love that. I think that's the message of this whole episode is there's not a better differentiator in the market than being you. Yeah. Nobody can copy you. Nobody can beat you. And so I
No.
love that. This is a great way to end the episode. Ross, we went a lot longer than I expected, but that's because it was that good. So
Awesome.
thank you so much. This was phenomenal. For everybody else listening in, I hope you took some notes. Maybe you reach out to Ross, connect with him on LinkedIn, follow his content, follow what he does. I suggest you put a little more of your personality in your prospecting, and I guarantee you're going to attract some pretty good clients. So Ross, one more time, man, thank you.
You bet.
For everybody else listening in, you know what happens when you get clarity? You mix it with confidence. You do amazing things. Have a good day.
Good. Awesome.